Have you seen the new FNAF trailer?
With Five Nights at Freddy's, I do feel like in this second film, we're delving much deeper into Vanessa. She was kind of like this weird enigma who just popped up and then has this deep attachment.
Alright, I watched Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and I can proudly confirm that critics can go eat a chonky pile of bricks because the movie was not a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. FNAF 2 was most definitely peak. With what I'm trying to make is that the movie's terrible reception is more overkill than the amount of midterms university students get throughout the semester, because this was actually such a fun time in the theater. So I
don't know if you've taken a look at the reviews for this movie, but they are not good. As of Friday morning, 12% of the 59 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive, and that makes it one of the worst reviewed movies of the year. But having seen it for myself, I don't think it's that.
All I know is I was hearing them saying that this one was supposed to be bigger, bolder, more animatronic, scarier. They listened to the fans and they were gonna make true on those promises, and well, I seen the movie. I sat down with Mr. Fazbear and Chica, and I'll say, yeah, they actually did listen a little bit to the fans.
But yeah, look at this. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is overall terrible. I mean, it's just nonstop of like these critics saying this movie stinks. Like, it is the worst thing. Why did I waste my time? It goes on and on.
And unfortunately, I simply don't think that that's the movie that they delivered. It just kind of felt like an empty film. That there just wasn't much there at all on any level.
When Five Nights at Freddy's 2 finally hit theaters, fans expected chaos, the good kind, with animatronics and lore and jump scares, everything that made the first movie a cult hit back in 2023. What nobody expected was the storm that followed. Critics tore it apart within hours of release, and review headlines called the sequel a disappointment, a mechanical mess, even a grab that nobody asked for. Rotten Tomatoes scores dropped faster than anyone could refresh the page.
Am I the biggest Five Nights at Freddy's fan in the world? Nope. But did I see the first film? Yes. Did I like it? No. But I could understand why others did. So I just saw the second film. Did I like it? Nope. But this time, I can't understand why others seem to like it.
And that's when things got wild, because while critics ripped the movie to shreds, fans did the exact opposite. Social media flooded with reactions, added edits and theories, with people calling it a love letter to the FNAF community. One person stood in the middle of all that noise, and she wasn't afraid to speak up. Elizabeth Lail, the actress behind Vanessa Shelby, the mysterious security officer fans can't stop talking about, saw what the critics were saying and refused to stay quiet. She went off. Her message made clear that this movie was never meant for critics sitting in fancy seats, judging jump scares with clipboards and scorecards. The players were the intended audience, the ones who spent nights decoding FNAF lore, hunting Easter eggs, and living through those pixelated nightmares for nearly a decade.
I get, like, the more and more I play a role, the more and more attached I become, protective I become, and hope.
Her response did more than defend the movie. What she exposed was something much bigger, the growing divide between professional critics and the fans who actually keep franchises alive. For Elizabeth, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 isn't a failure. She sees it as a success story, just not one the critics are ready to understand. To see why her words hit so hard, you need to know how the movie got here, and the story behind the sequel is just as wild as the one on screen. Fans begged for years for a true continuation of the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. The first film split reviewers down the middle when it released in 2023, with some calling it too weird, while others claimed it didn't go far enough. None of that criticism mattered at the box office, where it became a massive hit and an instant favorite online. Perfection wasn't the point. The movie felt like FNAF, and that's what mattered. Universal's announcement of a sequel sent fans into overdrive, and the theories started immediately. Would we finally get answers about Vanessa's true identity? Would the lore dive deeper into the bite of 87? Every scene in the background might be hiding a new animatronic, and people started hunting for clues before the cameras even stopped rolling. Expectations reached sky high by the time filming wrapped. The cast returned, the soundtrack teased new themes, and director Emma Tammy promised something darker, smarter, and more emotional than the first film. Elizabeth Lail, who played Vanessa, the mysterious security officer with a haunting past, became one of the faces of the movie. Her interviews teased cryptic details, hinting that this time we'd see who Vanessa really is, and fans picked apart every word, every frame of the trailer, desperate for clues. People were already calling it the horror event of the year online. The sequel sequel wasn't just another follow-up. Everyone expected it to be the moment, the payoff after years of speculation and fan theories. Opening weekend arrived, and that's when the story took a turn. Savage reviews dropped in the first wave. Words like soulless, confusing, and fan service garbage started flooding Rotten Tomatoes, and major outlets claimed the movie had lost its bite, calling it a sequel that fails to justify its existence. One critic wrote that watching it felt like seeing a horror movie made by an algorithm that only understands nostalgia. The people actually watching it told a completely different story. They were laughing, screaming, clapping, and loving it. Theaters packed with fans wearing FNAF merch, some even dressed like the animatronics, and what the critics said didn't matter to them. The audience was there for the experience. The divide grew into something strange online. Critics called it a mess, while fans called it a masterpiece. And soon those two sides were about to collide. If you thought the reviews were harsh, wait until you hear how Elizabeth Lail responded to them. Social media was on fire the morning after the premiere, and not in a good way. Rotten Tomatoes critics' score sat at a painful 34%, and comment sections filled with takes about how Hollywood had run out of ideas and the franchise was over. Entertainment blogs joined in, publishing think pieces with titles asking why Five Nights at Freddy's 2 proves fan culture is destroying cinema, and one headline bluntly asked whether the creators even tried this time. Here's where it gets interesting. The same movie that critics claimed was lifeless had audience reviews pouring in that told a completely different story, with fans giving it an 89% approval rating. People said things like the movie gets FNAF in a way no critic ever will, or that playing the games makes it hit differently, or that critics just don't understand the lore. This wasn't disagreement anymore. This was war. Critics dissected cinematography and pacing while fans pointed out hidden lore details the critics didn't even notice. One scene critics called nonsensical turned out to reference a FNAF 4 minigame that only true fans recognized. Fans suddenly defended the movie like it was their own creation, posting side-by-side screenshots, calling out reviewers for missing context, and rallying behind the cast and crew. One thing kept surfacing through all the noise: Elizabeth Lail. People were tagging her everywhere, asking for her thoughts, because Vanessa was one of the biggest reasons people showed up. The first film made her mysterious and conflicted, almost like she knew more than she was letting on, and the sequel deepened her role. For a lot of fans, she was the heart of the story. Critics who dragged the movie were also dragging her performance. Some said her delivery was too stiff, others claimed she didn't add anything new, and one critic joked that Elizabeth Lail deserved an award for keeping a straight face through this mess. That one crossed a line. Hours later, Elizabeth Lail responded, and what she said changed the entire conversation. Everything changed the moment Elizabeth Lail broke her silence. One simple post on X, no PR filter, no corporate statement, just her own words that read, "This movie was made for the people who grew up surviving nights at Freddy's, not for the ones who never made it past the menu screen." Less than an hour passed before the post had over 200,000 likes, and within a day, the hashtag #WeStandWithElizabeth was trending worldwide. Fans reposted her message with captions saying she said what we've all been thinking, and finally someone in Hollywood gets it. Support wasn't the only thing happening. This felt like vindication. The fandom had been told for months that their movie was too weird, too loud, or too obsessed with lore, and the star herself had stepped in and said, "That's the point." TikTok blew up overnight. Clips of her interviews from before the movie's release resurfaced, moments where she'd hinted that the film would be a thank you to the fans who built this world, and people started commenting that she warned us, that she's been protecting this fandom since day one. Bigger creators, movie reviewers, FNAF theory channels, and pop culture commentators began defending her. One viral video said critics don't get it, but Elizabeth does, that she's not trying to make Oscar bait. She's making something that feels like the game we grew up with. Memes flooded Twitter. Someone posted a fake Rotten Tomatoes logo that said, "Critics, 33%, fans, infinite." Others created edits of Lail standing up to critics, set to dramatic background music, and it became a movement. Beneath all the humor was something deeper: frustration. Fans were tired of seeing things they loved by critics who clearly didn't understand the source material, and they pointed out how the same reviewers who praised elevated horror movies were now roasting FNAF for being too niche. One comment that went viral said it best: "When a movie has a hidden metaphor, critics call it genius, but when FNAF hides 50 pieces of lore in one frame, they call it confusing." The tone shifted from playful to passionate after that. Fans began writing open letters, long Reddit posts, even fan essays about why Five Nights at Freddy's 2 mattered to them. They explained how the series shaped their childhoods, how it taught them storytelling through mystery and fear, and how seeing it roasted by critics felt personal. Elizabeth Lail stayed calm but firm through it all. She liked fan posts, replied to a few, and even shared fan art with captions that simply said, "You all get it." Her subtle way of acknowledging fans without attacking anyone directly made her look powerful, not petty, and soon even people who hadn't seen the movie yet were picking sides. The debate wasn't just critics versus fans anymore. It was outsiders versus believers. The debate seemed to be settling when Elizabeth gave an interview that completely reignited the Fire, an interview that made critics furious and fans louder than ever. A normal red carpet interview became something else entirely. The reporter asked the kind of question every actor dreads. How do you feel about all the negative reviews? And Elizabeth paused, smiled politely, and delivered her answer. She said it's funny because she thinks sometimes people forget that not every story is made for them, and that's okay. Five Nights at Freddy's is for the community that kept this world alive for 10 years, and that's who they made it for. No raised voice, no insults, but her calm, confident delivery hit harder than any complaint ever could. Clips of that moment spread everywhere. The phrase, "not every story is made for them," instantly became a quote that fans started printing on t-shirts, editing into fan art, and using as bios. Hollywood mostly ignored it, but critics did not. Entertainment blogs twisted her words within hours, and headlines read things like, "Elizabeth Lail dismisses critics in fiery interview," or "Actress blames bad reviews on out-of-touch viewers," or "Elizabeth Lail goes off, but is she right?" They made it sound angry and combative when she was just offending her audience. Their attempt to frame her as losing it accidentally proved her point, and fans noticed immediately. They started replying under every headline with screenshots of what she actually said, and one tweet with side-by-side comparisons showing the real quote versus the sensationalized headline hit 2 million views in a day. Elizabeth suddenly became a symbol, not just for FNAF fans, but for every fandom that's ever felt dismissed by critics. People posted that she's the realest actress in horror right now, and that finally someone's not afraid to stand up for fans. Her comments resonated far beyond the movie. Even non-FNAF audiences, gamers, horror lovers, and younger viewers began praising her for being authentic in a world where most celebrities stay quiet. The movie's audience score jumped even higher in the days following that interview, and box office numbers held strong even as new releases came out. Critics never saw that kind of rebound coming. Elizabeth didn't just go off, she turned a PR disaster into a victory lap. Reports came out that Universal had encouraged her to tone it down behind the scenes, but she didn't. She doubled down instead, posting a thank you note to fans that said they made this movie with love, chaos, and too much caffeine. But most importantly, they made it for you, and thank you for seeing it, feeling it, and defending it. That one message sealed it. No angry replies, no arguments, just gratitude. The fandom respects her because she didn't just play Vanessa. She understood her audience the way her character understood Freddy Fazbear's world. It's not about perfection, it's about connection. Elizabeth Lail stepped right into controversy in a media landscape where so many actors avoid it, and she came out stronger. A bigger question started emerging as her words echoed across the internet, one that would redefine the entire debate around Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Who gets to decide what makes a movie good? The critics with their ratings, or the fans who fill the theaters? That question was about to take the whole internet by storm. Another online argument is how it started. Critics tossing around low scores while fans defended their favorite film. The debate had grown into something much bigger. The conversation wasn't just about Five Nights at Freddy's 2 anymore. Everyone was fighting about who actually gets to shape pop culture. Critics posted long threads about how cinema is fading because studios cater too much to fans, and fans fired right back, saying they're the ones buying the tickets, not the critics. Rotten Tomatoes became the battleground, with critics' score sitting painfully low at 33%, while the audience score held steady above 90%. You almost never see that kind of gap unless a movie has completely divided the industry. YouTube flooded with commentary. Some creators took the critics' side, claiming fans were blinded by nostalgia, but the majority sided with Elizabeth. One video titled "Elizabeth Lail Just Exposed Hollywood's Problem" hit 2 million views in 3 days, and another called "Why Critics Hate Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and Why Fans Love It" broke down the disconnect scene by scene. Viewers ate it up. The longer the debate raged, the more people wanted to watch the movie for themselves, and that's when the numbers started turning heads. Ticket sales told a completely different story, even as review headlines stayed savage. Opening weekend surpassed projections by millions, and merchandise sales, plushies, posters, and fan-made t-shirts spiked online. The movie's hashtag passed 500 million views on TikTok. Critics said it was a flop. The box office said otherwise. Money wasn't the real win, though. The conversation was. Audiences had quietly ignored critics for years when it came to fandom-driven movies, but this time someone inside Hollywood had called it out directly, and fans finally had a voice that echoed theirs. Elizabeth's words became almost like a rallying cry. It's a movie for the fans, not for the critics. You saw it quoted everywhere, under reaction videos, in fan captions, even in comment wars. Critics began doubling down, accusing her of pandering and saying she was weaponizing fan loyalty, but those comments just made her supporters stronger. The truth was clear. The people who actually cared about the movie weren't writing reviews. They were buying tickets, showing up, rewatching, sharing edits, and keeping the film alive. The next chapter made it obvious which side really mattered if there was ever any question. The second weekend should have been a drop-off. That's what usually happens when critics movie, with audiences disappearing, numbers falling, and the story fading. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 didn't just survive, it thrived. Theaters stayed packed, nighttime screenings sold out, and something crazy happened. More people were watching it after reading bad reviews than before. Analysts were stunned. Some called it the Elizabeth effect, while others called it fan momentum. But to the people who knew FNAF, the explanation was simple. The fans had always carried this franchise, and now they were doing it again. Universal released updated numbers showing that the movie had nearly matched the first film's global earnings within 2 weeks. That kind of performance after scathing reviews almost never happens. Fans were organizing community watch parties on social media, filming their friends' reactions in theaters, and uploading clips with captions saying critics said it was bad, but they were shaking right now. Fan artists turned Lail's "It's for the fans" quote into posters styled like vintage horror ads. Cosplayers recreated Vanessa's new outfit and shared photos at conventions. The film had gone from disaster to cultural moment. A few critics even started to backtrack, quietly admitting that maybe they'd missed the point. One entertainment site wrote that whether you like the movie or not, you can't deny what it's accomplished. Elizabeth wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She was trying to prove the fans right. One of her interviews with an online magazine a week later summed it up. She said, "Art is supposed to connect with people, and if it connects with millions, then it did its job, no matter what a few critics think." That line struck a chord. It summed up everything fans had been saying for years, that storytelling isn't about pleasing everyone, it's about making someone feel something. That's what Five Nights at Freddy's 2 did. It made people feel, argue, laugh, defend, and unite. Perfection wasn't the goal, and it didn't have to be. The movie was alive. The fandom that once existed in dark bedrooms behind glowing computer screens was now filling movie theaters around the world, chanting and cheering and proving that their love for FNAF wasn't just nostalgia, it was power. Elizabeth Lail became something bigger than an actress through it all. She became the face of a movement, the symbol of a new kind of Hollywood, where fans have just as much voice as the critics who try to define them. One truth had become impossible to ignore by the time the dust settled. The critics wrote the headlines, but the fans wrote the history. This story proves that Elizabeth Lail was right from the start. This film was never meant for the critics. It was made for the ones who stayed up all night, lights off, heart racing, waiting for Freddy to move, and that's exactly who showed up. Everyone had chosen a side by now. The critics had made their case, the fans had made theirs, and the box office had spoken louder than either. Something deeper was happening behind all the noise. Something that went beyond Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Elizabeth's words had started a conversation about what it really means to make art for people. Not to impress the elite, not to chase awards, but to give something back to the ones who cared from the beginning. She said something in one of her final interviews about the movie's reception that stopped fans in their tracks. Movies don't always have to be understood by everyone, she explained. Sometimes they just have to be felt by the right ones. That line spread like wildfire. Fans quoted it in edits, turned it into wallpapers, and stitched it into TikToks with emotional music, because for so many people, this wasn't just about a horror movie anymore. It was about finally feeling seen. This franchise was built by a community of creators, gamers, and storytellers who refused to let it fade. They didn't need approval from Hollywood. They made their own, and that's exactly what Elizabeth understood. She wasn't just defending a movie. She was defending a generation of fans who had grown up with this world. People who learned to tell stories because of FNAF's mysteries. People who faced their fears by surviving virtual monsters on flickering screens. People who turned an indie horror game into a billion-dollar phenomenon. Her saying it's for the fans wasn't talking down to critics. She was standing up for something bigger. Passion over perfection. That message hit hard across the internet. Other actors began chiming in, agreeing that not every project needs critical approval to be meaningful. Some called her stance refreshing, while others called it risky, but everyone agreed it was real. Elizabeth Lail didn't just stand by her movie in a time when so many celebrities play it safe. She stood by her people. She didn't just win an argument by doing that. She changed the narrative. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 will be remembered for a lot of things. The animatronics, the hidden Easter eggs, the insane theories. More than anything, it'll be remembered for the moment. Elizabeth Lail looked at the critics and said, "This one wasn't for you." That moment became bigger than the movie itself. It became a symbol of fandoms fighting back, of stories told with heart, and of actors who refuse to let outside voices define what success looks like. Fans are still sharing their love for the film even now, weeks after the chaos. They're writing think pieces about the lore, making animations, dissecting every frame for clues about what comes next. The energy hasn't faded. It's evolved. Connection was always the real secret of Five Nights at Freddy's. Jump scares and hidden codes were never the whole point. The franchise was about connection between creator and fan, between character and audience, between fear and fascination. Elizabeth Lail understood that connection better than anyone. Glowing reviews and perfect scores weren't what she needed to validate her work. The fans' reactions said it all. They showed up, they cared, they felt something. That means more than any critic's rating ever could in today's world. When millions of people come together, people who share the same excitement, the same childhood nostalgia, the same pulse of anticipation every time those flickering lights go out, that's not failure, that's legacy. Maybe Five Nights at Freddy's 2 didn't impress the critics. Maybe it never will. None of that matters, because this story was never meant for them. The fans who stayed up late, headphones on, waiting for that first animatronic to move, they were the audience. The ones who laughed at the jump scares, rewound the tapes, and whispered theories into the night. They were the audience. Everyone who believed that horror can be fun, community can be powerful, and that real passion still matters, they were the audience. Elizabeth Lail didn't just play Vanessa Shelby. She became the voice of every fan who's ever felt dismissed, every creator who's ever been told their work isn't serious enough, every storyteller who dares to make something weird, loud, messy, and full of heart. Critics might want to think twice the next time they decide to call a movie too fan-driven or too chaotic. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 proved something critics can't measure. That emotion, loyalty, and love will always outlast a bad review. The critics got their headlines in the end. Elizabeth Lail and her fans got something better. A movement, a message, a moment no one will forget. This wasn't just a film at the end of the day. It was a thank you letter to the ones who've been here since night one.